Franz Boas says our global survey shows the continents are inhabited by a wide diversity of people, different in appearance, different in language, and in cultural life. The Caucasian or white race lives in Europe, North Africa, and West Asia. The Mongoloid or yellow race lives in East Asia, Australia, and the Americas. And the Negroid or black race lives in Africa south of the Sahara. The Europeans are united by the similarity of their physical build, and their civilization sets them off sharply against all people of different appearances. The Chinese, the native New Zealander, the African Negro, and the Indian American possesses not only distinctive bodily features, but each has its own peculiar life mode. Human types have their own inventions, customs, and beliefs. Race and culture are generally intimately associated. This means that racial descent determines cultural life. As such, the term primitive has a double meaning. It applies to both bodily form and culture. However, there is more prejudice based on this way of thinking and speaking. It is argued that in the races that make up the human race, there are deep biological determined differences. These are the attitudes that supported the horrors of African slavery, apartheid, the Jim Crow laws, Nazism, Japanese imperialism, and other crimes committed by mankind against itself. From time immemorial, there has been a popular inquiry about the origins of these diverse races. In the most recent discoveries, it has been determined that blacks were the oldest race between 5 million and 7 million years ago. In addition, Africa is the cradle of humankind. It is agreed that they spread from Africa into Asia and Europe 2 million years ago. But where do other races come from? According to the study, the so-called black man's age is indeed more than 300,000 years old. A recently published report by Rasmus Jacobsen on the evolution of a gene for skin color suggests that Europeans lightened up quite recently, perhaps only 6,000 years ago. Researchers made a major breakthrough by discovering a gene, SLC24A5, that apparently causes pale skin in Europeans. The gene is critical for melanin production, the predominant dark pigment of the skin and hair. 100% of Europeans have a mutation in SLC24A5 that impairs the function of the protein. The mutated SLC24A5 and SLC45A2 genes are identified as albinism genes. The genes those scientists used to find so-called white skeletons in Europe were albinism genes. They looked for the SLC45A2 and SLC24A5 genes in the 2014 study derived immune and ancestral pigmentation alleles in a 7,000-year-old Mesolithic European. Experts found that about 8,500 years ago, early hunter-gatherers in Central and Southern Europe had black and brown skin. They lacked versions of two genes called SLC24A5 and HSL45A2. These genes are responsible for depigmentation and pale skin in Europeans. Scientists look for the presence of the mutated albino genes SLC45A2 and SLC24A5 to tell whether or not a particular ancient human was white like modern Europeans. Clearly then, scientists used the presence of albinism genes in ancient humans to tell if they were white like modern Europeans. This was the largest DNA study on ancient people, and it completely rewrites white history. According to the study, modern whites were born in the Bronze Age after a large wave of immigration by a nomadic people known as Yamnaya, who came from Russia's steppe. DNA from Bronze Age skeletons shows that Europeans came from nomadic tribes who invaded during the Bronze Age. The find probably marks the end of more than 100 years of archaeological debate over whether the massive cultural upheaval seen in the Bronze Age, 2700 BC to 500 BC, was driven by ideas or by immigration. According to archaeologists, the entire history must now be rewritten into a story of mobility and human expansion. By extracting and identifying genetic material from 101 Bronze Age people excavated in Europe and Asia, scientists saw who Bronze Age people were and how they were related.